To say that this administration has opened the border is completely false.
The difference between the DNC and the RNC platform on this is it specifies immigration compared to an invasion.
Can you define invasion?
When you see on a camera that there's 10,000, 20,000 people that are marching to the United States, it is common sense that that's going to create a problem.
We have to get some facts straight. Undocumented people commit way less crimes.
We have people blending in and they're taking advantage of the system. So yes, if we need to deport, I'm all for it.
What is the percentage of that? What is the
It doesn't matter whether
percentage
it's a
of
percentage
that?
or not. The point is that they're here.
Our candidates in the upcoming presidential election have, shall we say, differences of viewpoint on immigration.
We can create an earned pathway to citizenship.
You have to get them the hell out. You have to get them out.
In this swing state debate, I'm in Arizona to hear from a diverse mix of people about what they want from American immigration policy. I'd like you all to just introduce yourself and tell me why this topic, immigration, is important to you. And I'd like to start with you, Tyler.
Okay, I'm Tyler Montague. I'm a lifelong Republican. I spent about 30 years as a Boy Scout leader. Had a lot of the Latino kids in our neighborhood in my group, many dreamers. And so as I saw in the environment, them being treated without proper regard for their humanity became an important topic to me.
Antonio Valdovinos, I'm a DACA recipient. My parents immigrated to the United States when I was 2 years old, so I've been in Arizona my whole life. And I got involved into Democratic politics about 12 years ago, looking for representation for our community, so that's why this topic's important to me.
I'm Joshua Delosa, and I am an Arizona native. I grew up on my family's cattle ranch outside of Nogales, Arizona. And the border, when I grew up, was nothing more than a barbed wire fence, which is much different than what's there today. So throughout my lifetime, I've seen the dynamics on the U.S.-Mexico border change significantly. My day job now is I am an immigration attorney.
I am Bella B. I am an immigrant to the Dominican Republic. I've been living in the United States for 40 plus years. So I have an organization that calls Padres Unidos that advocates for familias. And the reason why immigration is important to me, because a lot of time we only concentrate on blaming the politician and many other issues, but we are not seeing how many people are being affected through human trafficking. I have heard many stories, and we also have people, DACA, that have been here for so many years, but we have people that are coming in recently that are getting their paperwork before he does. So those are things that I'm concerned about, and that makes me want to speak on this topic, so thank you.
My name is Chris Clem. I'm a retired Border Patrol agent. I spent 27 and a half years as a U.S. Border Patrol agent. I was the Chief Patrol Agent in Yuma, Arizona, my last 2 years, where we were experiencing ground zero of the border crisis. One of the things that really drives me why I continue to talk on this topic today is our elected officials, a lot of our media, and a lot of the public conflate immigration and border security. And they are very much related, but they are not mutually exclusive. We can focus on the national security and the public safety threat of what happens at our border, at the same time coming up with common sense and compassion solutions that both impact the border as well as the immigration process.
Okay, Marissa.
Sure, my name is Marissa Hamilton. I am a survivor of domestic violence and sexual assault. I also now am the chairwoman of two nonprofits, Easy AZ and Easy Civics, and I'm also the policy director for a new group called ROAR, which is about restoring our American Republic. The reason why this issue is so impactful to me is because what's happened for decades is the system isn't working. We need an easy legal way for people that truly need to come to America to be able to come here. We need a legal way for the smartest and most talented people to come here. And we need a way where we have zero tolerance when it comes to the cartels and human trafficking and violence and drugs. What's happening at the border is so inhumane, and it just blows my mind that we would encourage people to come here where the price to come to our country is to be raped. That's unacceptable. That needs to stop.
So my name is Leina Montoya. I am the founder and CEO at Aliento. I am also an immigrant myself. I'm a DACA recipient. I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, which is just 15 minutes walking distance from the US side. I came in with a tourist visa. I learned when I was 22 years old, when my dad was in deportation proceedings, why we had migrated. My dad, unfortunately, was a victim of a crime. He was kidnapped by Mexican police. But my poor dad had to make that courageous decision whether to stay back in a country that he could be killed and his family can be killed, or try to look for safety. So that's why we fled, and I landed in Mesa, Arizona, that I call home. After many, many years, my dad just a month ago got his legal permanent status, which it has been a huge relief for my family. Just by the mere fact that I was over the age of 21, after my dad got his legal permanent residency, I would have to wait 5 years for my dad to become a citizen, and on top of that, 25 years for me to become a citizen. So I'm here in limbo, and I wish that my story was unique, but that's the reality of Tony and many other dreamers.
My name's Carson Carpenter. I'm from Prescott, Arizona. I went to high school up there, grew up there my whole entire life, so I'm very familiar with Arizona. And I've worked for 2 campaigns, one being presidential, one being a congressional, and I've worked for 2 congressmen. And I'm also the College Republicans at ASU president, and I'm the College Republicans of America's national committeeman to Arizona. We'll never get a 100% fix on this issue because just like any issue in our country, you can't fix 100% of issues. But what we can fix is the drugs coming through Mexico as a third party from China. What we can fix is we can fix a lot of these illegal migrants that are coming from island nations in the Caribbean, going through Mexico, unvetted, improperly going through our border. Most of the people in our country agree on 80% of issues. It's what the media hyper-focuses on the 20% of issues that we don't agree on. And that is to spar our population against each other. Once we dive into those issues and how we're gonna implement a policy to solve them is what the media will try to split us on, 100%.
All right, well, as a member of the media, let me try to split you on this issue.
Okay.
Because as I recall from your video, one of the first things you said is that we should have a zero tolerance policy towards people who are in the country illegally, I think is how you put it. Just while we're here, does anyone agree with that? Anyone else agree with that statement?
I think that's a very naive way to look at the issue. It's a very black and white way to look at the issue because, I deal with people who are in the country undocumented every day. Many who have lived here for 20 plus years, who are business owners, who are fathers, who are mothers, who have paid taxes, payroll taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, property taxes, who are contributing to our society. And to implement a zero tolerance policy, you're just completely removing all human dignity from the immigration system. It's not wise.
So you brought up human dignity as your main point. How about the human dignity in their travel that they have to come up here while they are in Mexico, while they are subject to these cartels, and while they are subject to having to pay these fines to come to the United States? They can get trafficked, they're open to it, they can get raped on the way up, they can get brutally murdered and thrown in ditches. It's just totally outlandish to say it's a human dignity problem once they get to the United States because they're not provided all these services. And the second we start providing those services immediately to everyone who comes in, then that leads to vulnerabilities. And a lot of those vulnerabilities are coming into the country. There was over 150 terrorists watch list people that came in through the open border policy. These are people that we don't want into our country.
We have to get some facts straight. The majority of undocumented people commit way less crimes compared to our US counterparts. Why? Because we're terrified of getting wrong with the law. If people had a legal way, we have DACA as an example. When people have a vehicle to do it the right way, we want to get right with the law. But the reality is that we haven't had any immigration reform since 1986. I wasn't even born. 1986, you probably weren't even born either. So I think that it's really important that we get factual into the reality about where is the data coming in. Of course, like nobody wants to have terrorists in their nation. If we really care about our national security, we want to know who's coming in. We want to make it accessible. We want to make sure that it's a fair process. But we can't forget that when we're talking about also national security, we're talking about a lot of human beings that want to get right with the law. And we just don't have the system to do that.
I would encourage all of us Americans to get to know our immigrant brothers and sisters, our neighbors, the people who live among us. And when you hear why they came here, I'm sorry, there is no human trafficking story. There is no geographical boundary, mountains, jungles that my clients have walked through and faced death and exploitation at every corner. Nothing is going to stop them from coming. And that's what it is. It's like when I sit with a client from South America who tells me the horrible things that happen to them and their family, and to say, oh, well, zero tolerance is going to really make them change their mind about coming to the United States, again, that is absolutely naive.
How long have you been here in the United States?
Over 20 years.
How long have you been here?
About 32 years.
And how long have you been waiting? Do you already have your legal paperwork, or are you still waiting?
I'm still in the DACA program.
Okay, so my problem is that right now, as we speak, people who are here undocumented are upset themselves because they've been here for years and they're placed in the back burner. And you have people, and I met 2 Cubans that came from Cuba not too long ago. 2 days old, they were here. And they're already waiting on their driver's license. Is that fair for you? That's the problem that we have. It's not that we're saying that the DACA or the people that are already here, that we need to have zero tolerance. We want to protect you. Let's take care of you first before we allow other people in.
A no tolerance policy can be implemented in a humane way if you resource it properly. And what we have never done is we have never resourced our immigration policy. And so if we had a system, for example, where we had enough judges to approve visas, to approve an application, where we had a legitimate front door that someone could go to a port of entry, they could have a place that they could wait, that we could process people within 7 days immediately, and we can get them going on a process to be able to come here legally, vet them, be able to identify the bad people and the good people. But the problem that we have right now is by not having a no tolerance policy, we are catering to the cartels.
I don't see a lot of Republicans advocating for giving more resources to migrants who come here this way.
Well, they have resources at the border to get more judges down there to process some of these people that are legitimate asylum claims. But then there's also legal immigrants who just come up to the border and they just want a better way of life. And they may, can you blame them? No, absolutely not. But they have to have a legitimate asylum claim, and they've tried to change the asylum requirements, which has just kind of created a whole system of failure.
Let's fact check that with the attorney. There hasn't been any administration cannot change the asylum laws. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Actually, this administration has recently made it more difficult for people to apply for asylum in the United States through the circumvention of legal pathways. So to say that this administration has opened the border is completely false. So the way that it works,
closed it legally.
The way that it works, okay, is that if someone comes to our border seeking asylum and they have not applied for asylum in a country that they have transited through, they are barred from applying for asylum in the United States. The only exception to that is if they schedule an appointment through the CBP-1 app and make an appointment to present at a port of entry to be paroled into the United States. If they do not do that and they somehow enter between ports of entries, what we in the business call EWI, entry without inspection. If they do that and they get into the United States, because technically you don't have to only apply for asylum at a port of entry. You have to apply within 1 year of being in the United States. So it doesn't matter. Typically, if you enter the country unlawfully, the crux is that you have to apply within 1 year of entering. But this administration has changed that to say that if you enter between port of entries unlawfully, you are barred from applying for asylum. So they've actually made it more difficult. They've, at the same time, implemented parole programs for certain countries, for Nicaragua, for Venezuela, for Haiti, for Cuba, which is a legal mechanism where people can stay in their home country and apply for parole. to be able to travel to the United States, and that gives them permission to stay in the United States for 2 years. And then if they apply for asylum within those 2 years, they are free to do that.
I'm not refuting anything that he said on the process, but I want to let everybody know that when I was chief, in the 2 years there in Yuma, over 400,000 people entered the United States illegally. And less than 5% of that ever mentioned the word asylum in our custody. What they did is when we processed them, because they'd be put in immigration removal proceedings, they were asked if they had a credible fear of returning, which they always said in the affirmative, which gave them a second bite at the apple, or a bite at the apple to stay, which means we had to turn them over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Well, they had no room because the administration had reduced detention capacity. So they got released, and now, and their hearings are set up for years down the road.
Would not a functional guest worker system be the best fence, though? Because the people, they don't want to waste their money, they don't want to risk their lives, they don't want to be part of a caravan. They would be happy to follow a well-functioning program if we had one. Yet it's at a political roadblock.
Correct.
Nobody
in
will
order
vote
for
it.
that to happen, you have to have the Republicans and you have to have the Democrats to agree on it.
Well, there's a lot of political capital in keeping the fight alive. And I think that's honestly why Washington, D.C. does not want to solve the problem, because...
And it brings money.
We can go back to Bracero program in the 50s, right? Where illegal immigration was over 1 million people, mainly Mexican nationals back then. I mean, that was the way it was. And then once the Bracero program happened and people knew that there was a lawful way and they would come here and work during that time and then go back. And I think you could probably confirm this, that majority of the people that we know, that I've dealt with, don't want to come here permanently. They really just want a better opportunity and they will go back. So if we made that available and there was parameters, we could see that, hopefully, and I see that stem of the illegal migration, which would help me, because from the Border Patrol perspective, to focus on the security piece. And I think that's where I think majority of Americans could find common ground. And I think it would really benefit all of us if we would just.
I think you're right, Chris, because the good people would follow the process. And all you'd have left were smugglers and
correct. And like you said, it was true. People used to come here and work. They want to live in the country. If I can work here and go back and live in my beautiful island, the Dominican Republic, I will do it.
We shouldn't make policy, though, based on people that are outside of our country. We need to make policy based on people that are inside of our country.
Right.
We cannot satisfy the whole world. We have to be able to make policy that is best for the people that are here, so that we aren't harming people that are already here, including immigrants. And some of the people that have suffered the most from the current, I'm just going to call it an absurd system, are people that came here either legally or came here illegally, but they are going to be stuck in poverty for a very long time and be reliant on the government until they die. That's not the American dream. That is sacrilegious to our values.
Well, ironically, they don't qualify for government assistance. They don't qualify, so they're not living off the government. Asylum seekers, they have to find work. That's one of the biggest misnomers around this issue, is that, people are just coming here and we, the people, are funding them. We're paying for them. It doesn't work that easy. I mean, I just want to clarify something earlier. It's like, there's no one skipping the line. I mean, when you talk about people who are recent arrivals and getting driver's license, and what they more than likely have received is a work permit. Maybe they've submitted asylum, they've waited the 5 months to apply, or they've entered on a parole program and they're able to apply for work authorization, which allows them in the state of Arizona to apply for a driver's license. So no one's skipping our friend here and getting legal status.
I want us all to take a look at this. I'm just going to read this aloud for everyone. Congress should provide the resources and authorities that we need to secure the border. This includes additional Border Patrol agents, immigration judges, asylum officers, cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect and stop the flow of fentanyl, and funding for cities and states that are sheltering migrants. Raise your hand if you agree with this.
Mostly. The devil's in the details.
Interesting. Any guesses as to where this is from?
That could be Biden's speech.
It's Biden or Kamala Harris.
Yes, this is part of the Democratic Party platform. This is interesting because we have the head of the College Republicans, who's who supports this, Border Patrol agent who supports this, and a whole bunch of pinko commies here who don't have anything to say about this, or who seem not to.
These are great talking points, right? I mean, it sounds great. These are great sound bites for politicians to say, we're going to secure the border, we're going to increase the number of judges.
Correct.
But it just doesn't deal with the reality, I think, that we're touching on earlier, is that I don't think anywhere in the world do we have a 2,000-mile border with the world's largest economy and as a gateway to the developing world. And the economy that we have in this country demands labor. A system that doesn't acknowledge that and creates some type of pathway to satisfy the labor that our economy demands and the reality of push factors that bring people to our border, these are just talking points. It's just not the reality on the ground.
Josh, I want to just make sure they should be getting in line though, right? They shouldn't be crossing to the desert through your farm in Nogales, right? If we had a clear pathway, common sense, things that work for American companies and American people.
But our people are angry at people who are getting in line. Like, yes, there are people crossing between these checkpoints in the border, but people are also angry that people are coming through the checkpoints in the border and saying, I want to be here. So, like, isn't this all kind of like, is it an arbitrary
But
distinction?
you also can't make policy based on what people are upset about.
No.
Like, that's not the, you don't make policy based on what's going to make people outside of the country happy.
And you make a lot of sense.
And you don't make policy based on the emotional, the emotional position of someone in the country.
When you look at the cost, you know, illegal immigration for years, early in my career, was always thought of as a victimless crime because people were coming to look for work and things like. But as we have suffered through inflation and gas prices and everything else, people are seeing this and looking at the amount of money that we're spending, and then wars around the world that is driving people going, wait a second, and it's actually. You know, and I've said this, it's caused an erosion of empathy around the country towards immigration.
Tony, what do you think of what he's saying?
I mean, I think in my own experience, I can only speak that I've never received any kind of government assistance financially. I mean, I actually wasn't able to finish college because there wasn't any ability to access any kind of scholarship.
I think the difference is what I was saying versus what's out there is like the short-term Band-Aid solution to try to deal with this is where it's costing the taxpayer dollars. I think where Americans are getting upset is these Band-Aid approaches. Just throw money at the problem because that's what Washington likes to do, and it'll fix itself.
I agree.
Reina, do you think there should be, does anything that he just said resonate with you?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree around the guest worker program that I think that there has to be sensible. It's not only the cost, but what about the revenue? My dad built his own business from ground up, and he has been paying taxes. He has been employing U.S. citizens. I now run a nonprofit where I employ 16 people, majority of them U.S. citizens. And what about also the contributions? I think that I definitely agree about what are some of those common sense solutions. One of the common sense solutions that I think the majority of Americans agree that has been pulled time after time is around dreamers. Children who came here at a very young age, who we have been paying into Social Security, who have been going into college. I mean, I hold 2 bachelor's degrees, a master's, and an executive program for Harvard. I was featured as Forbes 30 under 30 social entrepreneur, right? Like, I don't have a legal pathway for me, and I love Arizona. This is home. Why can't we just all agree and provide an opportunity for us to get in line to earn our pathway to citizenship? The majority of American people believe in that common sense approach.
What do we think of what Reina just said about giving people who came here as children a path to citizenship?
Well, like I said earlier, the media wants to hyper-focus on the 15 or 20%,
well, yeah,
where
I mean,
most of us agree that we
okay,
should
but this is what so I don't want to sit here talking about all this stuff.
about it too, because most of us should really focus on the DACA, the Dreamers, the asylum seekers, which are only 5% of all of these people that are coming in the border. They tightened up that asylum policy because of that second policy that you said, where if they feel scared to go back to their home country, they can stay here as their second chance. So it's gonna bring down the numbers of people that need to wait for judges, because that's all the federal government cares about is numbers. Oh, well, if we have less people going to these judges and needing court dates, then we're solving the border. They'll hyper focus that statistic or number with this current administration, blast that on social media, and this whole thing will go away. That's their naive look at this in their ivory tower in Washington. That's something that isn't true, and I think we both agree on that.
May I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What are your stances? What should happen with people like me?
The dreamers?
Yes.
They should absolutely be taken care of, and in that policy right there,
What does taken care of mean?
aims to take care of them.
What does taken care
What
of
does taken
mean?
care of mean?
Taken care of means providing a legal pathway for them to gain citizenship lawfully in this country, and that has not been done.
Right.
And faster, because there are security aspects that need to be taken into account, like I said earlier, with national security, but we can't ignore that 352 terrorists have came in, that 350,000 people have died of fentanyl that mostly was imported through that southern border, most of them being American citizens. We have to take a look at all of this data that's quantitative instead of just
It would seem to
some
me
of these other
that the
ones.
solution to that you're all kind of, or that all of you who are sort of in your camp on this are hinting at, is that because there's drugs crossing and there's bad actors doing bad things, we have to just shut the whole border.
I haven't heard anyone here say that we should have no immigration.
No tolerance on drug trafficking,
Right.
fentanyl trafficking, sex trafficking.
But
no
it sounds like
tolerance
May I ask
on
a
this.
question?
Okay, but-
May I ask
Yeah,
a question?
yeah, but you know what?
So the majority, I think like over 90% of fentanyl gets crossed by U.S. citizens. That's a fact.
Through the ports of entry.
Through the ports of entry. So my heart like breaks because you have to really think about what's going on for people to be able to consume something that is gonna kill them. And we have to acknowledge that.
Right.
But at the same time, we can't be using immigrants as a scapegoat and blaming them when that's not
We
the
are
reality.
not
I don't think that they're blaming the
I'm not
immigrants.
saying these
Yeah,
people.
we're not
I'm
blaming
not
them.
saying.
They are saying-
Where did
May
fentanyl deaths and immigrants
may I
as a scapegoat
clarify?
come
I'm not saying that people in the circle. What I hear often in the radio, where I hear in my neighborhoods, it's
Correct.
like we can solve immigration. We cannot solve the dreamer issue because we have a fentanyl problem. That's what I hear in my communities. And for me, and I'm not saying you all have been very gracious to share your point of view, but I'm saying that's the misconception that I
Correct.
hear. And I feel that when we can decouple like the facts and the reality, we're actually doing the disservice to our American families that are actually victims of fentanyl, because we're saying that immigrants are the problem of why we have fentanyl crisis, and that's a popular opinion
And I-
that I hear
I
in my
hear that all the
neighborhood.
time. I agree with Raina.
And
I
I'm
hear
not
that all the
saying you
time.
all. That's
agree.
what I
I
hear.
agree.
agree with her.
No,
Everyone hears
I
that.
absolutely
Yeah.
agree, and that's what I mean on we agree on 80% of things, but I think that we could all agree on that we need to separate out these problems and hit them with the most force that we can
But
to be
it
able
would
to
seem
solve
to
them.
me that you're hitting it with the most force means, I know you're saying let's not stop all immigration, but it sounds like you're saying let's not let people who are coming up to the border from Mexico, up to the southern border, that we should be saying, sorry, we're closed. We can't deal with this now because we have fentanyl, because we have smuggling. No one can
No,
come in.
what-
Why can't we do that? Why can't
Yeah,
we
why can't
prioritize
we?
it? Why can't we
Why
say
can't we?
right now?
I don't mean to judge. I'm not putting a judgment on it necessarily.
But no, what I'm
I just
saying
want to
is that
understand what your argument is.
That is
saying-
a priority of the American government to be able to protect its people. And if we are dealing with an issue, you can shut that gate. Or you can open it only for the lawful commerce and things that we did, like when we had the pandemic, like we did when 9/11 happened, right? We closed that border to only legitimate traffic. And so there are ways that can be done. This can be done.
I'm going to read this next thing. See what we think of this. We should reverse destructive open borders policies that have allowed criminal gangs and illegal aliens from around the world to roam the United States without consequences. We should be sending illegal aliens back home and removing those who have violated our laws. Raise your hand if you generally agree with this.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree when there is a practice that says we're not going to hold anybody until we get some kind of decision, so we're going to release them, and that allows criminal gangs to come through here.
If you have the criminal gangs and anything that brings violence into the country, let's be clear. We have some bad people coming, and I hear every single one of your guys' opinion, and I respect it. But at the same time, we cannot overlook at the fact that we truly have people blending in with the good people that truly want to come here for the American dream, and they're taking advantage of the system. So yes, if we need to deport criminals, gang, whatever it is, I'm all for it.
What is the percentage of that? What
It
is the
doesn't matter whether it's a
of that?
percentage or not. The point is that they're here.
Because I thought that was your
I think
point,
it's
right?
important
We
for
can't
people
be
to
focusing and
understand, too, when
fixating on very small
Hold on.
numbers.
You just said something to Tony. What did you just say?
I said nobody here disagrees with getting rid of
The bad guys.
The bad guys. Nobody
So
does.
then why didn't more people raise their hands? Because all that says, the only reason why you didn't raise your hand is the person who said it. It says criminal gangs, it says violated our laws. Those are the two main points if you read through that literature.
Can we look at that last sentence? We should be sending illegal aliens back home and removing those who have violated our laws. Let's get practical. Here in the state of Arizona, it is a crime, it is a felony to work. So if you, without the proper documentation. So if you get caught by working, you would be in that category. Me, as soon as I turned 18 years old, because I didn't self-deport myself to a country that I don't know, I am then violating the law. So I think we also have to get practical about who is this gonna harm, and that is not only the first part of the sentence.
And we have agreed. We have agreed with you. We have sympathized with you. We have said it. I have said it myself that the majority of the family that my organization serves are not necessarily here documented. So I want to be able to see those people that are already here helped before we allow anybody else searching for help. But that's the, and I don't, no, I'm sorry. So you cannot complain about you needing or you waiting for paperwork when everybody that comes in, it puts you back in the back of the line.
I'm not can I answer here?
Yes,
Just because out of politeness. So I think it's really critical that to answer your question is the fact that I don't have any resentment to the new immigrants because I put myself in my father's hard decision when he was fleeing violence, right? And I don't think I have worked with so many undocumented people, and if they were given an opportunity, there was something in our laws called 245I that you would have to pay a penalty if you broke a law to acknowledge, make amends, and be able to get right in the law. That program was ended in 2001, and that has actually increased our undocumented population, that a lot of the 11 million undocumented population could actually have a pathway to citizenship through marriage, through other avenues, but they can't because we haven't reauthorized that act. That's how many people were adjusting their immigration status. So that's why I think it's really critical when we're talking about this is I don't have any resentment because I understand the plead, but at the same time, if we are not practical, like we can also be Pollyanna and believe that if we just shut down the border, that people are gonna stop coming. We have to figure out a two-way solution and get practical with how do we protect the national security of this country and how do we create practical legal avenues and reauthorize them and update them to the 21st globalization century.
And
that
I
we're
think
living.
that we agree with all of that. I think
But
that we all say that.
I want to go to another one of these. When the system is overwhelmed, the president should have emergency authority to expel migrants who are crossing unlawfully and stop processing asylum claims, except for those using a safe and orderly process at ports of entry. The authority should be accompanied by humanitarian exceptions for vulnerable populations, including unaccompanied children and victims of trafficking.
So that's the executive order pieces of the Senate bill. The president already has the authorities. INA's 212 already allows him to expel.
Well, let's think about should the president do this?
Absolutely,
I mean, is really what I'm asking here. So who thinks that an order like this would be smart, just, good? Raise your hand. This is another proposal that's come from the Democratic Party platform that and the only people who have supported it are the people who seem to be probably voting Republican, which I just think is interesting.
That's because Democrats campaign as moderate Republicans to get elected.
That's because say that again. And everyone be quiet while she says that, because that's a good line.
That's because many politicians in the Democratic Party campaign as moderate Republicans to get elected. So it would make sense for them to put forward policy statements that make them sound like they don't actually want to have.
But it also sounds like, you said with great conviction that this is already happening under a Democratic administration. So I don't think it's all bullshit.
What if it had the number 5,000 a day right here, like it actually was in the original
that would be
bills
the
and laws?
bipartisan bill from Cinema, no?
That never got passed. Yeah.
Langford?
Wait, sit down so that you're in the camera.
But that's my point. That's my point. It's a lot different when they say once it reaches that 5,000.
Bedrock of America is due process. That's what separates us from many countries across the world. And in order to honor our international agreements for asylum laws, I think the very least we can do is afford people fundamental due process outside of a detention center, we're going to disagree on that, to present a valid asylum claim or present their claim and develop a system that allows them to do that.
Is the counter argument to Josh that there's always going to be an endless supply of people who are suffering At a certain point, you can only service the people, a certain number of people, and just as a practical matter, at some point you have to say, sorry, but like we can't accept any more, we can't even consider any more asylum claims or any, I mean, is that a fair summary of what I think of as the close the border argument? Is that fair?
There should be certain numbers based on all of these variables that come into play about their status of life, what they're gonna live in the United States, among this other stuff. It has to be calculated in, because we do that with business, we do that with healthcare, we do that with all the sectors of our economy and our government, but why wouldn't we do that at the border?
Seeking asylum in the United States is not illegal immigration.
Right.
Because our law allows that. It doesn't care. It doesn't matter if you enter the country unlawfully.
Okay.
You just have to apply for it within 1 year of your last entry.
Right.
Or you can approach a port of entry and seek asylum. I mean, that is not illegal immigration.
Okay. But is orderly process a port to entry? Why is that not due process?
Well, that depends on what it looks like, right? One of the biggest problems that emerges with these 10 courts that were along the border, where the government was trying to develop a system where they could just basically set up like a car wash, get people in, get people out.
Tucson, the quick courts, right?
And it's just, you have people who have legitimate claims to asylum. One, filling out the application in English is a challenge. They do not have or have very limited access to attorneys. No one in the immigration court system under the Department of Justice is entitled to an attorney at free of cost. They're entitled to have an attorney, but at their own cost. So unless you have attorneys who are willing to go down there and do pro bono work, or somehow these families are able to gather money to hire counsel, you're gonna have a lot of people who have legitimate asylum claims being processed through these car wash court systems that are gonna be sent back to countries where they're gonna be killed.
Marissa, you said something earlier about you have to make decisions based on what is good for the people in a country as opposed to what is good for the people outside of a country. So when you hear kind of bleeding heart stories like this, like is all of that irrelevant? Because basically your point of view is, I'm sorry, but like we need to do what's good for America, and yes, that's very sad, but we need to do what's good for the people living here.
I feel for people. A lot of the things you said, I totally agree with. Let's solve all those things. Just simply having it at the federal level is where a lot of the ability for it to not be solved comes from. Why does the federal government have to be the only one being the bottom line on all of these ideas? Why can't we find out what's best for Arizona?
Well, because the Constitution says
this is what we have. This is what we're dealing with when you talk to libertarians. Because unfortunately, we live in reality, and we can't. I mean,
You can't have 50 immigration systems.
The Constitution does not prohibit us from being able to have a round table of minds that, like, our senators assign and then bring ideas back to them.
The problem is that there's no political will to solve this issue because there is so much capital in keeping the fight alive, especially here in Arizona. Look at the politicians who have so much fame off of making this an issue.
Correct.
Sheriff Joe Arpaio did it for a number of years. Carrie Lake, who is currently running for the U.S. Senate. If you watch her ads on a daily basis, you would think everyone approaching the border is coming with a bag of fentanyl on their back. And it's just disgusting. It just frankly is disgusting. And we're not going to make any progress on this issue when, one, we focus on anecdotal stories. Well, I know this one guy from Colombia, who got a fake passport from China and walked in. I mean, the fact of the matter is that terrorists aren't going to say, darn it, you know what? They closed the asylum system, so you know what? I'm not going to make it to America. Cancel my terrorism plans to date. That's just not reality.
I would just want to peel the layer back and say, look, in my circle, and again, it's not the largest circle, but every Border Patrol agent I ever met, we didn't have a problem with DACA because of how the process worked, right? I was the CBP lead under President Obama when his executive orders went forth in 2013 and 14 that addressed DACA and proposed DAPA and all the other things that happened. So I have a lot of experience on what was actually happening and what the trade-offs were. And we fought. That's why nothing got done.
Which was the best administration from your perspective as a border agent? Who do you, in your 27 years?
For border security, Trump. For immigration, none of them.
Was executing the child separation policy difficult for you?
No, because it wasn't a child separating policy. That is what's wrong. It was a prosecutory initiative that targeted people that came in illegally, that had criminal backgrounds, and if you came across illegal and you were a felon, and you had your kid with you, yes, there was a separation because that was...
You're saying that the only people who had their children taken away from them were people with criminal backgrounds from
the ones that I
countries they
prosecuted,
came from?
the ones I prosecuted, the ones I know of.
Yeah, it's not accurate.
Well, I
But if he lived there, why are we going to say that he's not accurate?
So if you want to talk about child separation
But-
under Trump, let's talk about the kids in cages under Obama,
Absolutely.
because it's
I'll
on
give you
both
that.
sides.
I will
Okay.
give you that.
Actually,
Okay, we
Thank
have to
you.
move on to this next thing. We will use all resources needed to stop the invasion, including moving thousands of troops currently stationed overseas to our own southern border. We will deploy the U.S. Navy to impose a full fentanyl blockade on the waters of our region, boarding and inspecting ships to look for fentanyl and fentanyl precursors. Before we defend the borders of foreign countries, we must first secure the border of our country. Who agrees?
agree with the last line.
Okay. Any thoughts on what we have here?
The difference between the DNC and the RNC platform on this is it specifies immigration compared to an invasion. They use two different words. The DNC platform I've looked through, they don't do that. They mingle them
No,
together.
they don't use the word
and that's
invasion.
why we see no ground being made on the Democratic side or this administration. We haven't.
I'm curious, what can you define invasion?
Invasion?
Yeah, what would be your understanding of it? I'm legitimately curious from your perspective.
When they're talking about an invasion, it's talking about the flood of fentanyl, it's talking about child sex traffickers, it's talking about all of these things that are violating our laws. Those are the things that they're talking about in the platform instead of just crossing the border immediately. They're more focused on child sex trafficking, fentanyl trafficking, all of this other stuff.
And unfortunately, it get lost in translation because that's when all of us and everybody start believing that they're basically targeting the immigrants that are coming in.
Don't we feel that if the Republicans were worried about people mistakenly thinking that they were targeting immigrants, they wouldn't use language like, we are going to stop the invasion? I mean, when you think of an invasion, you think of hordes of people coming in.
Like
most
what
of the
happened in El
people...
Paso
The
earlier this year?
the RNC had posters that said mass deportation, right?
Yeah.
So can I please get clarified, how is that not, like, I'm really having cognitive dissonance. I'm not trying to be a smarty pants here. I'm legitimately asking, how am I, someone who has DACA, not be able to combine those when you have disinflammatory
And I don't blame
language
you.
and have mass deportation as the background when former President Trump is talking? I'm literally having cognitive dissonance, and I'm asking.
Can you blame people for thinking that's what they mean? Because they say
Correct.
mass deportation, and the non sequitur is like, oh, it's so terrible. People being trafficked, and there's fentanyl coming. Let's deport everybody.
Well, 350,000 fentanyl deaths isn't happening by a few bad
But
actors.
can you please clarify my dissonance? Because for me,
I
that's
absolutely
You
not
are correct.
Can I-
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm
You're
giving
done.
quantitative data. I'll give qualitative now. All of these deaths that are happening nationwide has to be done by a wide network. It can't be done by a few bad actors that are coming through the border. That's just simple numbers adding up.
Let me
right?
clarify my question, because it doesn't seem that it's not addressing my question. My question is how me, someone that has DACA, that President Trump actually worked with Attorney General Sessions to end the program that right now it's holding by a thread because it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Most likely I'll become undocumented again. How is that not connected to mass deportations, and how am I not seeing that? Because what you're saying is that the RNC and the administration is not combining those issues. But what I'm seeing is this platform and the signs that said mass deportation, that's a blanket statement that includes all of us, including me. How is that not the same? And how am I not supposed to pair them together?
Well, the DNC platform combined them together
No,
as
we
well.
can talk about DNC. I agree with some of that, and let's talk about DNC. For the record,
Well,
I'm not
Kamala-
a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat or a Republican.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to get the dissonance that I have with the RNC, because that's the claim that you make.
The Democrats are not calling for mass deportation.
I
The Democrats
didn't
are
see
not.
signs of mass deportation at the
he's saying
DNC.
that
I didn't.
So there's two things going on.
Yeah,
so,
please help me.
Yeah. So in all full
didn't get the
disclosure,
answer.
I am very good friends with Carrie Lake. And the reason why I'm very good friends with Carrie Lake is because of the fact that her policy position on this is about humanity, and especially about the children. So when she's talking about what's happening at the border when it comes to immigration, and Republicans are saying that we need to deport, there's a couple of scenarios that I think that covers. And I think that, to your point, I think that some of this terminology needs to be fleshed out. But for example, I personally have friends that have been murdered by people that Maybe they did come here seeking asylum legally, but they already had a violent past and they killed people. I think that we have to look at the fact that we have legitimately had an invasion. When you see on a camera that there's 10,000, 20,000 people that are marching to the United States to overwhelm the system intentionally, knowing we don't have the resources to humanely process people, it is common sense that that's going to create a problem.
So Carrie Lake has said that she would want Dreamers to be deported. That's like a fact. So I think that that's why for me it's so hard to reconcile. I consider myself someone that deeply cares about Arizona and that cares about the well-being of our nation because I grew up here. America might not recognize my papers, but I feel American because this is where I grew up. This is where I learned how to drive. This is where I had my first kids. This is where I got married, right? This is home, and I want to be able to provide solutions to make it better. And that's why I decided to engage in this conversation because I really want to listen that it's like, okay, if we don't want to make blanket statements, then why should my destiny also be tied and I should be punished because of the few stories that are committing heinous crimes and then I should get deported and then get...
But it's not...
But that's
not
not
a
Carson, you wanted to answer.
May I answer that? And I think she's asking a fair question. We blaming mass deportation. I'll be scared too, right? I'm sitting over here stating that people like yourselves that have been here for more than 20 years, and I have always, and I'm not afraid to say it in camera, there are people like them who deserve better of a citizenship of the United States than people that were born in this country, who are a disgrace to this country. Bottom line, I say it, I don't care. But I do understand what she means. We have to learn that to separate, if we're gonna say mass deportation, she's right. Does that include me? And if you guys saying no, it doesn't, then we need to be more clear because now we're involving everybody.
If it said, we were going to target deportations for those that have outstanding warrants of removal from an immigration judge and those that have felony convictions that are still residing in the United States, if they said that, would that change the narrative?
Are those the felony convictions based on working? Because you have to prove, if you don't want me to benefit,
regardless,
I'm asking a question.
I'm making a statement that's clear here. If the message said those with convicted felonies,
But if it's a felony to work with undocumented there, then like, okay,
immigration related, they're baddies, they're drug dealers.
Well, yeah, of course, violent criminals, right? I mean, they're already prohibited.
These people want to deport some people. Give them some people to deport.
They're rapists, and if they kill people, I want them out.
Right,
I don't care.
but see,
This is very important for political Arizona. Tyler, what did you just agree to that you'd be okay with mass deporting?
Oh, like criminals that are, and I don't
Violent
mean
criminals you're talking about, right?
Not immigration-related crimes.
I know, but
so,
but I mean, that's a problem is that we demonize this whole entire group of population because we start using
they've committed a crime or they've killed someone?
No,
No, you're not listening to what I'm saying. What I'm saying
Please
is that
listen to the attorney.
people like that are already subject to deportation. No one is asking for them to be allowed to stay in the United States. What the problem is when you start using inflammatory language and start saying fentanyl, and then you associate that with an entire immigrant population in the United States, you're conflating, a public health issue, an addiction issue. It's a law enforcement issue, okay, that people are trying to piggyback or associate with immigrants, and that's just not...
see, it goes back to
we have not done that.
Border security.
That's where you lost me.
To stop the invasion, I mean, what do you think he's possibly talking about here?
People that don't go through a port of entry.
Yeah. What do you say in 2015?
But that's not where the fentanyl's coming from.
Mexicans are
criminals, rapists.
We've got plenty of...
I'm not a rapist.
I know, but he's
For the
characterizing
record.
all that. It's a lie of scale.
The whole thing I was trying to get across is, would it change anybody's mind if it said we are going to target those for deportation that have an existing warrant from a judge for order of removal of abstention and those that have violent criminal background?
What do you mean by target? Like by sending people?
We're going after you. We're going to, if we find you, you're removed.
Okay,
That mass
so
deportation,
we're
the
gonna
scope
send
of
people
that
into
is
communities and look for these people and hunt them down.
Obviously not. That's why we have the CIA and the FBI, and if they get
if that's
stopped by
what-
the
if that's what it
police
nece-
and
if
they
that's-
find records of them, then you deport them.
But are
Nobody's
you-
sending the National Army looking for anybody.
How they do it, the how we'll argue on, right? I think that's the, but what about the what?
But then, doesn't that go back to your original argument where we are talking about allocation of resources, right? Are we then taking away from people who are hunting down fentanyl sellers and human traffickers to hunt down people who may have a deportation or because they missed their court date? I mean, it's just
specifically said
again,
outside of immigration. He specifically.
Though you can have it, or if you don't show up for court,
right?
You can be ordered removed. That's due process. They chose not to follow it for whatever reason, and they were ordered by a judge that says they're removed.
That's the law.
So that's the law.
Of the land.
And again, that's the point I'm trying to get. Is I don't agree with the biggest mass deportation. That does not make sense because strategically it's not going to happen, right? And the injunctions will happen.
Why say it then?
Yeah, why do you think he's saying
Because
it?
they're politics.
Because
they're politicians. They're lying.
Okay. Our last question here. Think about an argument that you heard tonight from someone who you broadly disagree with. Give me their best argument, and I want you to really sell it. So Bella, we'll start with you.
I truly don't disagree with anybody. I respect everybody's opinion. All of us have our own experience, and the division and the misinformation is so much out there that is bringing fear to people. Right? It's bringing concern to other people, but I'm so proud of every single one of you because I can honestly say that I agree with most of you.
Wow.
All of you. I really do. Certain things, but I think, like he said, 80%, I think that we all agree at least on 80% of these issues.
Tony, was there anything that you heard tonight that changed your mind or changed your opinion about something?
I think for me, it's not about opinions. I've always been very grateful to be in this country. It's been disheartening to have so much division, especially with this conversation of fentanyl. You know, it is easy to tie it to immigration, but at the end of the day, there's so much human aspect to it. And that's what's hurtful is that you start criminalizing and demonizing people for seeking a better life in a country that has been built by immigrants. Immigrants have fought wars for this country, but ultimately for me, as a DACA recipient, I'm grateful and looking for more ways to contribute to our country. I'm a business owner. I've employed over 120 people this year alone at $30 an hour. I believe in this country. I believe in entrepreneurship and the American spirit of building. And so that's my thing. I've learned a lot from people in this room.
It kind of goes back to, we've got to figure out a clear and lawful pathway that allows those that really need asylum who are getting persecuted and tortured, give them that priority, and then also figure out ways that we can make the immigration system much more smoother for those that can contribute, that want to contribute, that want to be here, and legalize those that have been fighting to do the right thing. That is healthy, and that is reasonable, that is common sense, and that's compassion. And we take the same energy, put it to the security side as well, and I think we can come up with a solution. And I think it's reasonable. And we're not going to be perfect, but let's not make perfect the enemy of good when we have people's lives in the line.
Amen, brother.
Reina, real quick, what was the best thing you heard from the other side that you thought was interesting?
I don't think it's even from the other side. I think even my takeaway is the fact that there's so much agreement. I agree that we have to decouple national security and immigration, and we have to start from a place of solutions and how do we get things done. I think all of us agree around dreamers, so why can't we get that done?
Carson.
80% of us agree on 80% of the issues, right? And I would say talk about Reina's compassion and humility to the people that have came into this country under the past 3.5 years and beyond. I think is the most standout thing tonight is showing that compassion and humility to this humanitarian issue. Homeland security is a totally separate issue. And I think showing your compassion and humility speaks volumes in terms of this whole entire discussion. And I think that should be the one thing that is taken out of this whole panel between us.
Well, we solved it. Thank you guys for participating. This was a true pleasure. Okay, yes, let's stand up and thank you so much.
Are we going to sing Kumbaya?
Absolutely not.